Call Deputy John McGuinness.
Thank you. I'll ask Count Corley. Firstly, I want to compliment Justice Charleton on the very efficient way that he dealt with the tribunal and the very clear report that he submitted following that tribunal. He was unambiguous in his comments on the various issues raised, and I believe he has shown the government and the state a way that a tribunal can be run in shorter time and efficiently. I also want to acknowledge Deputy Maurice McCabe's role in the, Sergeant Maurice McCabe's role in the tribunal and the outcome. And I am satisfied that the tribunal heard his version of events and that they were clear in their acknowledgement that he was vindicated in everything that he did and said. As for the government and the apology to Sergeant McCabe, let me say this. It was the most blatant, brazen piece of hypocrisy that I have seen in a long, long time. For 12 years, Sergeant McCabe was telling his story, outlining his description of what was happening, highlighting issues within the force. And the government stood idly by and did absolutely nothing. In fact, the time for the apology and the intervention was when the now Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, then a minister, said that Maurice McCabe's actions were distinguished, not disgusting. And yet the government sat on its hands and watched as that family were put through torture in all of those years. So you continue, Minister, to preside over a department that seems to be dysfunctional. I have seen no evidence of the reform that was promised and committed to. There are many examples of that. For example, the Public Accounts Committee is currently hearing from prison officers, Noel McGree. And in all of the questions I've asked in this House, I'll ask Count Corley to say that they were economic with the truth and misleading in its content is an understatement. And yet the department feels that it's okay to stand over that. So now that you've been converted to examining the actions of the department and show a willingness to say when you're wrong, will you tell John Wilson that you were wrong? Will you tell Noel McGree that you were wrong? Will you tell the two female whistleblowers that I'm aware of that you were wrong? Will you intervene now and say to them that you're sorry for what the state has done to them? Will you give them a chance to get their lives back on track in the way that you should? I doubt it, because you don't have the backbone to do it. And that's the sorry thing about what is happening. The tribunal, it came and it went, and it left behind the report. And you seem to think that the dogs will bark and the caravans will move on. But there's a turn that has taken in the country, and it is a demand for truth and justice from all of us that serve the people. And they're not getting truth and justice from the department. They're getting anything but. And the government has to be dragged kicking and screaming to court or through tribunals before they will acknowledge what is really happening to individuals in the employment of the state. I gave you the examples already, Minister, and I've asked you to intervene. And perhaps when you're finished, you might tell us what you're going to do about it. There was a motion passed in this House in relation to the investigation into the death of Shane O'Farrell. A motion that was put and passed. The government haven't taken a single action to implement the desire of the opposition to have that matter investigated. It's a further example of how you let an individual like Shane's mother, Lucia, and father and sisters just wallow in the sorrow of losing a son. You just will not intervene. You fail to understand the devastation that you have visited upon their lives by not recognising them. And then in the end, having the motion in the House passed and nothing being done about it. If the confidence and supply arrangement stood for anything, if it meant anything, it should make a difference in people's lives. And in that confidence and supply arrangement, Fianna Fáil should step up to the plate and tell you to act on the motion or else. And that is what we are coming to, because the state and the government is presiding over the beating up of our citizens by state departments. And there are others who have come forward, state employees, who have given disclosures similar to the actions of Sergeant Maurice McCabe. And to say that they have been treated badly, again, is an understatement. Their lives have been ruined. In some cases, they're professionals and their lives have been ruined. Their careers have been ruined. And there are other cases in the Department of Agriculture, for example, with Douglas Fannin, a case that has not been dealt with by the department. They just continue to ignore it and pull people through the courts. Only last week, the Department of Defence went to the High Court, where they were totally and absolutely wrong, and where they had given incorrect and inaccurate replies to parliamentary questions. Yet, in the Morrissey versus State case, the Department of Defence lost. And thankfully that young man is now taking his place in the cadet school. So I've just highlighted a few cases, but let me talk about one other one, where again the House set up an investigation, and to this day we don't know what's happening, and that's the Grace case. Individuals that were mentally and physically challenged, non-verbal, abused in the care of the state, and the state is sitting on its hands rather than dealing efficiently and factually with the cases of Grace and the 47 others. What more do we have to do in this House in the context of debating issues, of highlighting issues, and of getting action from a government that, quite frankly, Minister, doesn't seem to care? The only reason you apologised was because you were flushed out. It came out into the open. You couldn't beat Maurice McCabe. But there are many others out there that you seem to be prepared to beat. You're dealing with a case presently in John Barrett. I wonder why that's coming about and what's going to happen. So when individual citizens raise issues in this state, the government's answer to them is to bring the House down around them, to push them to the pin of their collar, to break their careers, their families, their health. And no response from government, no showing of humanity or compassion, no attempt to bring in the reforms that are necessary to stop all of this from happening again and again. And people turn to this House for direction and leadership. They turn to this House for protection. They believe that they're doing the right thing. And if you ask Maurice McCabe, I'd say he's doubtful whether he would do it all over again. But yet he has done an enormous service to the state and is to be commended for what he did. But he should be protected for what he did. The others should be protected for what they did. And I've given you the names. I've often mentioned them in public. And out of all of those cases and that motion that was passed, the Shane O'Farrell case, I think, is one that would clearly demonstrate to people the fact that the state and the government has no interest unless you push it to the point where action has to happen. And by that point, the families are generally broken. So, Minister, you and your government have an awful lot to answer for. The political system in this House has an awful lot to answer for. And this supply and confidence arrangement has a lot to answer for, because it doesn't demand transparency and accountability. And where it sees the need for it, as they did in that motion with Shane O'Farrell, it's just not prepared to do anything else. It's an exercise in voicing your opinion about things, rather than it being an exercise to put in place a fair play justice and an acknowledgement that the state should not beat up families and should not ignore them. They should do the opposite, show compassion, humanity, and an attempt to deal with the reality of the lives of the people that are being destructed by the inaction of the state.